Hello everyone and welcome to this workshop organized by the Animal Health and Greenhouse Gas Emissions Intensity Network. First, I would like to acknowledge the organizers of this workshop for the invitation given. In this talk that I'm gonna speak about the link between animal welfare and greenhouse gas emissions. First, I would like to start on discussing about the units that we can use to calculate greenhouse gas emissions. First, we could use total emissions, which means that or it counts the total emissions produced by a given animal or herd, etc. That's the first method. The second method is, and the third actually, is the calculation of the emissions intensity, which actually is corrected either by the quantity of feed taken by an animal. That's the method number 2, and it is represented by the kilos of CO2 equivalents by kilos of feed. And the third option, still using the emission intensity approach, is correcting the total emissions by the product, so represented by the kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents divided by kilograms of product, for instance, either milk or meat. In this talk, we will focus on the emissions intensity, either using feed or the product, and it will depend on the conversion efficiency of feed into animal products. These can be varied, for instance, meat, milk, or eggs, depending on the animal species. And the higher the conversion efficiency, the lower the emission intensity. In other words, a cow that is very efficient in converting feed into milk will be much lower emitter of greenhouse gas emissions compared to a cow that is less efficient. In this figure by Hayes et al. That was published a few years ago, it represents very well the concept on the emissions intensity. So in the red dots, you can see represented the methane in grams per liter of milk, and you can see that it dramatically increases in cows producing more kilos of milk. Similarly, in the dots on blue color, it is represented the grams of methane per kilograms of feed eaten. So in both scenarios, either if we calculate the emissions intensity by the quantity of milk or the quantity of feed eaten, in both cases, you can see that the more animals consume feed and the more the cows produce milk, it will be beneficial for the emissions intensity. And how is this emission intensity related to animal welfare? In this point, I would like to highlight stress as a principal compound in animal welfare that makes emission intensity to be different. Actually, stress causes an energy depletion which is not dedicated to production nor growth. That means that a cow, for instance, that is under stress, it will produce less milk and will grow lower. So the reduction of stress, which is a welfare improvement in itself, may increase production efficiency. So improving welfare reduces the likeliness to suffer from disease, which again increases the emission intensity. For instance, in a first scenario that you have on top of the slide, you have cows being suffocated, so in apparent signs of heat stress, and they will produce a higher amount of greenhouse gas emissions per the same quantity of milk. Whereas the lower example, where you have cows that are apparently not under stress, they will produce a lower quantity of greenhouse gas emissions per unit of milk. That is the reduction of emissions intensity. And this figure represents numerically the relationship between the stress response and greenhouse gas emissions intensity. A group of cows was divided into two subgroups, one showing a high cortisol, in other words, these more stressful cows, and the other subgroup was showing a lower cortisol concentrations. Remember that cortisol is the principal hormone regulating the stress response. So as you can see from the figure, the emission intensity in kilograms of methane per kilograms of feed intake was significantly higher in those cows showing higher levels of stress. At this point, I would like to introduce the Clear Farm project, one of the first research projects linking animal welfare with environmental impact, and more specifically, greenhouse gas emissions. The Clear Farm project is using PLF technologies, so precision elastic farming technologies, to monitor the welfare status of animals. That will be used in the future for informing farmers about the status of their animals, but also for labeling purposes. So informing consumers about the welfare status of the animals that produced the food products they are purchasing. But in parallel, in Clear Farm project, we are also calculating the environmental impact of livestock production. So consumers can also be informed about not only the welfare status of the animals, but also the environmental impact, and including the greenhouse gas emissions of the products they are purchasing. And how is Clear Farm calculating the environmental impact? So we are using primary data from farms, including data from PLF sensors, but also other data from the whole production chain. And we are using the framework of a life cycle analysis. And initially, we are defining the objective. So what is the system functional unit, to later establish an inventory analysis. And this includes animal production, so the impact of animals and their productivity, also the manure that is being produced and its management, but also everything related to the feed production process. That will inform about the environmental impact through an assessment using the methodology of recipe midpoint system. That will need some interpretation of the life cycle analysis that will be combined with the animal welfare data. And the life cycle analysis will include different hierarchical points, starting from the raw materials used for feed production, including fertilizers, pesticides, etc. Also, the feed production process itself, and the animal production, being this one probably the central hierarchical point to consider. In this point, it will be included also the carbon footprint of animal health products, including antibiotics, hormones, but also the management and processing of manure coming from animals. Later, all the different steps of the process, including meat processing, packaging, distribution, etc., will be also included and considered in this life cycle analysis. So to conclude, I would like to finalize with some take-home messages. That is, improving animal welfare, especially from poor scenarios, so when the animal welfare is poorer, it increases production efficiency and reduces emission intensity. The Clear Farm project is one of the first research actions linking animal welfare with environmental impact using high input PLF sensors and comparing this information into a life cycle analysis on dairy and pig farms. The generation of life cycle analysis inventories will improve the understanding of the metabolism of farms and identify strategies that combine better animal welfare and reduction of carbon emissions. Altogether, it brings new win-win solutions that we are sure that society will use in the near future. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to your questions and comments. Bye.